prelude and the lighting of the candles. Please join me in the call to worship. Teach me your ways, O Lord, and I will walk in your truth.
Give me an undivided heart, that I may fear your name.
I will praise you, O my Lord God. With all my heart, I will glorify your name forever.
For great is your love for me. You have delivered me from the depths of the grave.
Please join me in the prayer. We
Come this day, O God, in the name of your Son Jesus, to worship you. Help us to be open to the leading of your Holy Spirit, in order that we might have a fresh experience of your grace. Help us to be open to the leading of your Holy Spirit, in order that we might be empowered to go forth from this place, equipped to serve both you and your people. Help us also to be open to the leading of your Holy Spirit, in a way that we might become conduits through which your Spirit may flow. We ask all these things in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.
I'm obviously not Chip Koch, so if you came here expecting to hear, an awesome sermon from Chip Koch, I apologize. You got Jeff Meyer this morning, and we'll see whether it's going to be worth staying for just a bit. We're going to go to prayer time here in just a moment. I just share with you a couple prayer concerns. We had 2 deaths in the life of this congregation last week. It's kind of cool Chip leaves, and then we deal with 2 deaths. Just thank you so much for that. First up, and I think everybody knows about both of these deaths, Ken Marshall, who was pastor here from 1982 to 1999, passed away last week. His funeral was yesterday, celebration of life over at Koch United Methodist Church. Nice crowd was there. Ken probably baptized, confirmed, or married many people in this room. And so we celebrate his life, and our thoughts and prayers are with Liz and the family during this time. Also, Bon Hinkle passed on Thursday evening. This is Greg and Gary's mom after some painful suffering in the last few weeks. Her calling hours will be 4 to 8 this Friday at Spence's now, and her celebration of life will be in this space at 11 o'clock next Saturday. And we would invite you all to be there and celebrate her life as well. We pray also for Pastor Chip and Bev as they are going through a transition in their lives. I think they're now moved, is that correct? So they're now living in their retirement condominium in Etna, I believe. And how was it so far? Good. Right. And so that's all good. We'll also raise up the Women's Walk to Emmaus that's going on at Brownsburg Church this weekend. Susan Stoff is a pilgrim there. Long Bay and Emily and Chip are on a team for that walk. So we raise those up as well. We'll go to prayer time here right after our prayer song. The altar obviously is always open. I think one of the wonderful cultures that we have within this congregation is that nobody goes to the altar alone. You go up here, and even if you don't have a totally unspoken concern, somebody comes up and is with you. And I think that's a wonderful culture that we have, and I'm grateful for that. So, with that. whatever it is that life has presented us with. But Lord, we come grateful that we can come and be with you and ask you to take these burdens and to share the burdens or simply take them from us. Lord, we're grateful for that opportunity. We're grateful for life. We're grateful for what you have given to us in terms of blessings. We're just grateful for the fact that you are in our lives and that you want to be a part of our lives and want us to be part of yours. Lord, there are many prayer concerns that we've listed in the bulletin. There are major prayer concerns that we've mentioned already. And Lord, we just ask that you be with the Marble family and their friends as they go through this transition of his passing. We ask that you be with the Hinkle family this week as they lay Lonnie to rest. And let them know that your love is with them, that our love is with them, that we care about them, that we lift them up in a powerful way, and let them be the palm of your hands at this time. Lord, we're asking you to be with Chip and with Bev as they transition to this new home and this new chapter of their lives as they celebrate retirement here very shortly. We ask your blessing upon Jonathan, Manny, and Kelly as they prepare to move to our community and to our church family. And we ask your special blessing on the ladies and Chip who are the Wolves this weekend. Lord, it is a privilege to be able to come to you, creator of the universe, and say thank you and be in relationship with you. And we just extend incredible gratitude and appreciative of that blessing. Lord, close our prayer time with that prayer that you taught us to pray. Thank you, our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Will the ushers please come forward? all those that are in need of some help. Maybe we don't know who they are, but use this to help where people come to you and be a part of your kingdom. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. James 1, verses 2 through 4. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking in anything. Here is the reading of the Lord's Word.
Well, good morning again. Thank you for the privilege of sharing a little bit of God's Word with you this morning. bulletin has some space in it for any notes that you might want to write down. I pray that because I believe these are God's words, there may be something that's meaningful to you. As I was here, two things I'll share with you. First of all, I decided to wear a light colored suit because it's spring. I don't care if it's spring. So, some of you would say, well, it's a little early for it. I don't care. We're wearing it. And I came in today, and Aunt Lisa's barefoot. You can't see that. And I asked her, I said, can I go barefoot? She goes, no. I said, well, why not? She says, well, because you're a grown-up. So I thought we might just all take our shoes off. So if you want to quietly take your shoes off, perfectly fine. Aunt Lisa's all with us and everything. No shoes. Can I take mine off? All right. So here we go. So for those of you who might have looked at the sermon title and said, gosh, I am hoping he spends some time recounting Bob Dylan's 1964 song, The Times They Are A-Changing, and somehow convert that to an Earth, Wind, and Fire reference, as a former pastor would do, like maybe keep your head to the sky. I'm sorry to disappoint you, we're not going to be going that direction this morning. But I do want to spend some time talking about transition. Joyce and I are in the midst of an unusually heavy amount of transition and change in our lives. Over the last year or so, we have emptied and sold Joyce's 96-year-old mother's house after moving her into a nursing facility. Many of you know she was in the hospital the last few days. She's back in the nursing home as of yesterday in Bedford. So we appreciate your thoughts and prayers on that. Our daughter Jennifer moved to Phoenix with one of our grandsons. One of my Cherokee brothers, Mike Handler, passed away, a true brother and friend. 5 of our 15 staff members at the office have left our employment for a variety of reasons, including medical disability, returning to school, and retirement. We've hired some new folks. We've moved some folks around to new or additional responsibilities. We hired a new doc to handle the reduction of schedule of 2 of our other doctors. We welcomed a new granddaughter, Margot, to our family, our 4th grandchild. A dear family friend, G. Wilson, passed away at the age of 99 as his power of attorney, executor of his estate, part of the responsibility of emptying his house, and the house he lived in for almost his entire life, fell to me, and a myriad of other details fall to me. Pastor Chip announced his retirement. Joyce is serving as staff parish chair. I'm serving as a co-lead leader with Larry Hilbert. So we've been intimately involved in that transition. We're delighted to have a new appointment that we think is going to be an excellent fit. Our practice administrator's husband was recently diagnosed with colon cancer in his late 30s and has undergone surgery and is now waiting to heal enough to undergo chemotherapy. He had a second surgery, surprisingly, about 3 weeks ago for a scar that had adhered in his small intestine just below his stomach. He's recovering very well from that now and preparing for chemo. And oh yes, we had a house fire last June. We are still displaced. We expect to be back into our house the next 10 days. Most every day, and certainly every week over the last several months, have required a decision to be made about this thing or that thing. I don't normally use my phone during a message, but I want to share with you a text we got on April 10th, earlier this month. This has been typical, okay? Morning, Jeff. Couple things for you, and I do apologize for the short notice of some of this. Number one, can we have the bath vanities at the house by this weekend? Well, one was in the garage of the apartment, the other was still at Lowe's, and Jason Pearl was guarding it for us. This was a Tuesday morning, so yes, we can get that done. Number two, can you have the outside lights to the house tonight? We didn't know we were selecting outside lights, so that could be a challenge. Number three, can you get the under cabinet lights to the house tonight? We didn't know we were selecting under cabinet lights. A sidebar, we selected 2 different under cabinet lights, and the electrician didn't like either of them, and went and bought them himself. So Number 4, how soon can you get the range hood to the house? Well, the range hood had been at the apartment for like 3 weeks, and we've been asking, when do you want it? And they all said you want it, so okay, that's fine. And number 5, can you bring the barn door over tonight? We're having a barn door installed in the master bedroom for the walk-in closet, and certainly we can do that. I believe that's it for today. Again, sorry for the short notice. That's been our life the last several months. I want to be clear. Understand I'm not complaining, okay? Simply, I am recognizing that we are currently in the midst of uncommon changes and transition in our lives. Now, some of these changes, most of these changes or transitions, are just part of life. They're the challenges that come about through life at one time or another. It's just unusual to have a number of them at once or in a short period of time. Now, you might look at this list, you might say, Jeff, you don't know what I'm going through. You have no idea what I'm going through. That list is nothing. You've got nothing on me. We empathize with you, okay? Or maybe your load is lighter right now, and you can certainly celebrate that. Frankly, the only one of these transitions that has really rocked our world is the fire. Because no one really prepares you for dealing with that. Few other folks really understand what you are going through. Change and transition can bring about stress. We have felt that stress in a wide variety of ways. I want to share a scripture with you. From Hebrews 9, verses 16 and 17. This is from Peterson's The Message. Like a will that takes effect when someone dies, the new covenant was put into action at Jesus' death. His death marked the transition from the old plan to the new one, canceling the old obligations and accompanying sins, and summoning the heirs, that's you and me, to receive the eternal inheritance that was promised them. He, Jesus, brought together God and his people in this new way. For a moment, I want to just imagine that we, each of you, we are one of the disciples in the upper room celebrating the Passover. The Passover that we refer to as the Last Supper. Now, some men in the church here portrayed this on Monday, Thursday for you a few weeks ago, providing some insights into the sentiments of the various disciples. We've all been with Jesus for some time, for several years. We've laid down our businesses for him. We have sacrificed relationships with others for this itinerant preacher who went against the grain of the Jewish establishment. We've been away from our families, following him, watching him, being with him. The sun has set. We're looking forward to this time with Jesus. Just us guys, the inner circle, to celebrate the Passover. It'll be a joyous time. A place to celebrate one of the highest traditions of Judaism. It'll be a time to remember our ancestors' escape from the effects of the 10th plague and release from the Pharaoh. We've all celebrated Passover all our lives, and we're familiar with the elements of the meal. The questions, the matzah bread, the 4 cups, the bitter herbs, the roasted egg, the roasted lamb bone, the songs, all familiar, all expected, all normal, all tradition. Then some unexpected things occur. Jesus announces that someone in the room will betray him. That's a change. Jesus has been telling us he's going away, though we don't really understand. He implies it's about to happen. That's a change. The expected normalcy of the Passover feast is disrupted. Anxious conversation occurs about who's going to betray him and how that's going to happen and why is that going to happen. That's a change. Jesus adds something to our familiar Passover ritual that we all know so well. He says the bread, the matzah bread, is his body. He says that the 3rd cup, the cup of redemption, is his blood. This is confusing. That's a change. The betrayer leaves the Passover feast before it's complete. That just doesn't happen during Passover, that somebody just gets up and leaves. That's a change. The betrayer leads a group to arrest Jesus. That's a change. Each of us is challenged about knowing Jesus, and we all succumb to protecting our own safety and deny knowing him. That's a change. Jesus is arrested and beaten. That's a change. Jesus is crucified. Wow. That is a change. And all of this stuff has happened in the last 20 hours. Talk about rocking a world. Later we find the bodies missing. That's a change. And the same day we find the bodies missing, Jesus appears to a couple folks on the road that leads to a town called Emmaus. That's a change. Later he appears to all of us in a resurrected form. That's a change. I can't speak for you, but as one of the remaining 11, my world would have been rocked beyond comprehension. I wouldn't understand. I'd be at a loss, be distraught, be saddened, very confused about the whole thing. How do I process this for myself? What do I say to my family? How do I explain this to my friends? We know that all the disciples reacted with denial and association with Jesus, just as he predicted. We know that some could not even believe the resurrection. We can feel their confusion from the reports of the Gospels. But within a matter of weeks, the book of Acts reports that they get themselves about the business to which Jesus called them to do, healing and proclaiming the gospel message. They got their focus off of themselves and on to bringing others to eternal life through a relationship with Jesus Christ. How could they do that after having their world rocked? Remember that Matthew reports Jesus' final words to the 11 after the resurrection. Now, these words are commonly referred to as the Great Commission. What are the final words that Matthew reports Jesus said after giving them instructions about spreading the gospel? Matthew 28:20 from the New International Version. These are Jesus' words. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. How is that for some assurance as they go about the business of spreading the gospel? Jesus says he will be with them. What's going to be bad about that? Knowing that Jesus is going to be with them gave them great assurance. But guess what? That message is not just a message for the disciples of that day. That assurance is for you and for me as we go about the challenges of our days here. Jesus says to us, just as he said to the disciples of his day, and surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. One other scripture helps to describe a sentiment that kept them going. Hebrews 13:8. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. Amen. Jesus Christ is the same today and yet yesterday and today and forever. You see, the disciples knew that the trials and tribulations of today are temporary. They knew that life is always in transition, always changing. A life that is stable is really going backward. They knew that a poor catch of fish today was temporary. God would provide a catch. They knew that a bad agricultural year or two was temporary. God would provide a crop. They knew that the illness of one of their family members was temporary. God would provide healing. How about us? Do we have that confidence? Do we believe these trials and tribulations, these changes and transitions are temporary? Like some of you in this room, I've been through a divorce. It was more than 20 years ago. Enduring the daily trials of that experience were similar to the fire experience in some ways. There's a sense of shock, of loss, of grief. You live day to day understanding that your planned schedule may be upended at any moment. Sometimes when you're in the midst of these transitions, it's hard to believe things will ever resolve, and that normalcy, even a new normal, will ever occur. It's hard to believe that the transition will ever be over. You live 1 week to the next, 1 day to the next, 1 hour to the next, sometimes 1 minute to the next. Some days, it's hard to simply have any hope. Years after these transitions occur, we can look back and see them from a longer perspective and see that they were a temporary part of our life. They do shape us, they do affect us, and they do weave the fabric of who we are. But they are temporary. In the midst of substantial transition, it's sometimes tough to recognize the temporary nature of the transition. But we can learn from the example of our disciple friends. You see, they focused on Jesus. They focused on the eternal prize by putting things into perspective, maintaining their priorities, and persevering, they were able to do what they were called to do. We can learn from them. Remember that you and I are not the first people to have challenges. We're not the first people to suffer loss. We're not the first people to experience grief. We're not the first to go through transition or experience change. But we can learn from the actions of the disciples. When these stresses of life begin to overtake us, when they begin to feel like an avalanche, when we feel like we cannot handle much more, remember Hebrews 13:8. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. While everything around us is in transition, the one stable element is Jesus Christ. That is true assurance. That is the blessed assurance we sang about a little bit ago. James Packer, in a book called Your Father Loves You, says this: Grace is God drawing sinners closer and closer to Him. How does God in grace prosecute this purpose? Not by shielding us from assault by the work of the flesh and the devil, nor by protecting us from burdensome and frustrating circumstance, not yet by shielding us from troubles created by our own temperament and psychology, but rather by exposing us to all these things, so as to overwhelm us with a sense of our own inadequacy and to drive us to cling to Him more closely. I would point out this: remember that change and transition are a vital part of life. Now think about this for a minute. If no change or transition occurred in your life, you'd all still be in diapers. I didn't say back in diapers, I said still in diapers. You'd still be relying on someone else for every meal. You'd be unable to walk and only able to communicate by crying to let us know when you were hungry, tired, or needed change. You would never know the thrill of driving by yourself. You would never have had a romantic relationship. You would never have learned anything. You would not know the joy and wonder of holding that new child, grandchild, or great-grandchild the first day of their life. You wouldn't know the difference between Kanye West and Earth, Wind, and Fire. You could not appreciate art and the difference between Grandma Moses and Rembrandt. You would never know the satisfaction of that first day of retirement. Here's something to think about for a minute. If there is no transition or change in your life, you will never know and accept the gospel message and experience the joy of Jesus Christ as your Savior. This list is all about internal changes within ourselves. Usually it is the unexpected external changes around us that we talk about and will relate as stressful. Those are the ones that we want a way to be comforted and to be reassured. Those are the ones that we want someone to lean on and to visit with. As I pointed out, it's difficult when we are in the midst of these transitions and changes to be excited about them. But we're instructed in the Scripture today to appreciate them, to be joyful about them. Here's how today's Scripture puts it. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of any kind, many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. James says that the testing of our faith produces a perseverance, and we become more mature and complete in our faith through that perseverance. For anyone who has been through a transitional test of faith, I think you would agree, it is difficult to realize in that time that you are being made mature and complete. For Joyce and I think the perseverance of this season of transition is guided and comforted by the Scripture that I've shared with you today. First, Matthew 28:20, and surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. Hebrews 13:8, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. And James 1, just verse 4, let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. My prayer for you would be that whatever your transition, whatever your change, whatever your trial, whatever your tribulation be in this season, that you can take comfort in these Scriptures and the Word of God. Amen. I share this benediction with you. This is a poem, an unknown source, but it talks about our view of transition and God's view of transition. So listen carefully. My life is but a weaving between my Lord and me. I cannot choose the colors, he worketh steadily. Oft times he weaveth sorrow, and I, in foolish pride, forget he sees the upper, and I the underside. Not till the loom is silent, and the shuttle ceases to fly, shall God unroll the canvas and explain the reason why. May God add his blessing to each and every one of you this week. Amen.